Well, thank you, Robert, for taking time to chat. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you.
My pleasure.
So I've been looking everywhere for the short story that Delia's Gone is based on. I can't find it. How did you stumble on it?
Well, you couldn't find it because it's unpublished.
Ah,
And I stumbled on it because I know the writer Michael Hamblin, and he had written this short story actually several years before I started working with him, and he had mapped out other versions and other scripts and stuff. And so, but it was a project I had connected with Michael on a few other things. And but that's why you couldn't find it. So it's the original shorts in the original story that Michael had. Lewis was much older. It includes some of the same themes of him having to effectively break out of prison and try to track down those responsible for the death of his sister. But it was quite different, and so we kind of worked together to update that.
awesome. That is very cool. I just love the entire theme of this film, like with the lead character's mental state and the way he processes things, and I'm going to ask you about that in a little bit. But was there one particular thing about the story that you sort of latched onto that compelled you to tell it?
Um, I mean, I've always been a big fan of old folk music, and there was something about like the song "Delia's Gone" is an old song by Blind Willie McTell, which has been updated by Bob Dylan, Johnny Cash, and others. And like some of the other characters and names were also kind of based on these old uh, folk kind of mythological characters. And I grew up in a very small town and have always wanted to tell a rural noir. And so it felt very personal to me. And so there was a lot of themes and elements of the story that I thought, ooh, this, I could personalize this and tell this story. So that's kind of why.
Yeah, okay. I kind of find that your films can easily be described on a color spectrum, if that makes sense. Like if I had to describe Delia's Gone, it would be a bluish grey. Similar to Stockholm would be like a yellow film. Does that make sense to you? Is color something you have in mind when you're writing?
Um, Not exactly. I mean, I think because Delia's Gone is a rural thriller, and I think about the American Midwest and also southwestern Ontario, which is where I grew up in Canada. I do think of I mean, ironically, I think of kind of like the browns of the empty fields and stuff, but ultimately there is kind of a coolness. I know something like Stockholm had a bit more of a vibrant color because of the 70s and the costumes, and it kind of, it's more of a dark comedy, whereas Delia's Gone is anything but a comedy.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. Cast is phenomenal here. It feels to me like this was an ensemble that you go after rather than auditioning. I don't know if that is the case, but is that how it came together? Did you go after all these people?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely did not audition any of these folks. And yeah, I felt very fortunate. We shot this, during COVID times. This was a couple years back now, and it was a bit crazy to be shooting. And we were one of the first ones to shoot during COVID, just when it was starting. And so it was kind of a miracle. It's always a miracle when the stars align and you can put together a great cast like this. And they all had to come up in quarantine for a couple of weeks in Canada, and we were able to pull it off.
Yeah, very cool. Stephen James is kicking goals as well. Excellent casting. I think he plays the mentally handicapped persona really well without overplaying it. Was it difficult to bring his character to life on screen without sort of courting controversy? Because a lot of people can be very sensitive to those things.
Well, I mean, the reality is like I was able, I brought him to the screen through some prep and through working with him. And then, what happens after is kind of like beyond your control. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think it also depends on the times. Like this film has a bit of an old soul and kind of comes from that original Mice and Men kind of feeling and plays like the Ferryman or something like Sling Blade. But those were all pre kind of Me Too and pre kind of certain movements. And so, we all know we live in more politically sensitive times regarding race, regarding a disability. And so it is much trickier nowadays, no matter what film you are, to
Mm.
do that. Um, and so I just think, Stefan and I were very sensitive to that. But no matter what you do, you can never completely win on that front. And you
Yeah.
kind of just have to accept that and try to do your best.
Well, I think you get away with it. That's sort of that's my point. I think
Yeah,
he
I hope
presents
so.
it really authentically. There's something about his character that I can't quite pin. I feel like there's almost an entire movie happening inside his head, because there's
Mhm.
so much sort of comprehension and almost sleuthiness going on in there that we don't necessarily know, but we can detect it's happening. What was your main direction for him in terms of inner dialogue and things like that?
Well, you know, I think it was one of the things that interested me about this is you've got this guy who isn't functioning necessarily on exactly the same levels of detection as you'd expect from a guy who's kind of tasked with this effectively solving and being the detective for this murder. And so that's what's interesting for me is you kind of don't want to hear all of his inner thoughts. That being said, I think when you see the flashbacks, the only person he really expresses himself properly to is his sister, and now
Mm.
she's gone. And so I tend to be drawn to these films where characters often are quieter and a bit more lonesome. And then the trick with those films is that they don't have as many people to talk to and tell them about what they're thinking. And so, but I always like that
Mm.
personally in stories and in
Absolutely.
characters.
I reckon also Paul Walter Hauser is one of the great unsung heroes of our time. I just absolutely love this guy. Another one that I'd love to have a chat with and pick his brain. But he strikes me as a lovely guy. How did you find working with him?
Paul is a very, very lovely guy, and I absolutely adored working with Paul. He's definitely one of my favorite actors in the whole world. He's so good, and he's so easy to work with, and he's so kind. I literally cannot say enough about Paul.
I'm trying to place where in time his level of fame was when he did Delia's Gone when you shot it during the pandemic, and he was
Well,
well
I
and
mean,
truly established by then. But like
yeah.
such a great get, and he is kind of unusual in the film and yet fits it perfectly.
Hmm. Yeah, it was interesting because in a way, he's not who you'd expect for that character opposite Marissa, but then in other ways, I think he brings a certain lightness and naturalness to it, which I really liked. And part of me, once they start, it's what happens with these things. You start working with him and those two, and it's like, oh my God, I would have liked to have delved so much deeper into those relationships. Like, but it's not really their film. And it's like, oh, you almost wish it was like an 8-part miniseries, which kind of really opened it all out because I'd love to work with Paul in an even bigger role, and I hope to be able to do that at some point.
That'd be great. I just feel like, in this film, when it comes time for his character to step up, he really does, and you really feel it. And I get that in all of his performances. He has this ability to just sort of flick a switch and just, ramp it up. And I love it. But also, in your film, you've got, fellow Aussie Travis Fimmel, who's also been riding a high for several years now. And I would love to interview him as well. But I'm guessing he had come off Vikings at this stage. What was it about him that appealed to you in this?
Well, I think Travis brings a certain kind of rough gravitas. Like, he doesn't have to do much. He's got those magnetic eyes and he's got that look and the feel. So he can just really do very little and communicate so much with his presence. And I always like actors like that who he doesn't need to try too hard. He doesn't need to say too much. He kind of can be himself and he gives you what you need. And again, he was really great to work with, really down to earth, really easy. And he's another person who I'm hoping to work with again.
That'd be cool. I follow him on social media, and like there is no one more down to earth than him. He's a real Aussie lad, that's for sure. He's a lot of fun. And obviously Marissa Tomei, goes without saying, she's a favourite on our podcast. We talk about her work all the time. Great to see her playing this type. Like, was she really down for, you know, being, I guess, made less attractive?
Yeah, it was one of the things that I think attracted her and probably scared her. And I thought that was quite interesting because she often, she comes from playing a lot of these sexier roles, romantic comedies, and to play like a rough older sheriff. And we made her look old. We added wrinkles and we made her look, a certain thing. I think it takes a certain amount of bravery for an actress to do that. But she's so experienced and she's done so many things, and it also just takes a certain trust. I think, I was able to have that with someone like Ethan Hawke, who I've worked with a few times, and I think Marissa, we found that trust, and then she was willing to go there, which was great because it makes it more believable.
100%. If I could just pivot for a second, I'm wondering how it is that you work when you're looking for your next project, and because none of your films, I must say beforehand, none of them are the same. You've got a really awesome way of picking projects that separate themselves, and you haven't latched onto a particular one thing. What do you look for in a project when you're going from one to another?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to define, but I am attracted, naturally because I'm a man, in North America now, like in around 50s. You still tend to gravitate to things you can relate to and personalize. And so not always, but generally I tend to default to like, slightly more male driven roles for guys that are in their 40s or 50s that I can kind of understand.
Mm-hmm.
And like typically, flawed male protagonists who are in some way seeking some form of redemption for something. That if there was any kind of unifying thing, I think throughout my work, it would probably be that. But that being said, quite enjoy different genres doing different things. And I often just look for films that speak to something that I really fall for, but then also have good roles, because whether I'm writing or whether I'm just directing, it's all about trying to work with great cast all the time. So that's always kind of the driving force.
Yeah, I noticed that behind you, you've got posters of your films, and Born to be Blue is larger than the rest. Is that because you're particularly proud of that, or is it more of an aesthetic thing?
No, it's just because that happened to be a French. The French have these kind of oversized. It's the only oversized poster I've ever gotten, but the French did a huge release on that, including box sets and CDs, and so did the Koreans and the Japanese because they're obsessed with Chet Baker. So I have all kinds of unique merch on that film from those places.
Very, very cool. I love that one too. And your next one coming up, or it has come out in the States and North America, is Queen of Bones, which we're yet to see down here. I can't wait. And if it has released here, I've missed it, and I'm really, really going to kick
No, it
myself.
hasn't. It hasn't. We played a few festivals here, but it actually hasn't been released. It was at Toronto and it played Santa Barbara, a few other festivals. But there's going to be a theatrical here in the fall, and then I'm not sure yet what the Australian plan is. It's usually follows, so I suspect that'll be in 2025. But I'm excited about that one. That's yet another different thing for me.
Absolutely. The trailer is creepy as fuck. Like, it looks really good. Love Martin Freeman. Very excited. What color would you say that one is?
Well, it's interesting because we have two prints of that one. We have our kind of 30s film, which has got this austere. We tried not to overly desatch it, but we also have a pure black and white print, which is just black and white,
Wow.
which to me is my favorite, because to me that feels like the Grapes of Wrath, that kind of 30s depression era, which is kind of the look and feel of the movie. But we didn't shoot it in black and white though. So but who knows? Maybe some territories will use the black and white. We're kind of giving it to everybody, but I expect most places will use the color because it's a bit more commercial. And so, yeah, I don't know what color I'd call that film. It's kind of, hopefully has a bit of a kind of a faded look, but hopefully not too desaturated, because I find it can start to get a little cliche if you kind of go too hard on that.
How would you describe the film itself for all of us that haven't seen it?
Yeah, I mean, it's really just it's a supernatural thriller. It's obviously got the Steinbeckian kind of period drama aspect, a little bit of folk horror stuff in there. And it's the first time I've ever worked with kids as leads. So it's Julia Butters and Jacob Tremblay. They're the leads, and then Martin Freeman and Taylor Schillings and some others. So that was a first for me to have the film driven by kids. A lot of challenges, but they were great. So
Yeah, cool. I'm excited. I can't wait to see it. And I hope that we have some boutique labels down here, and I hope that whoever picks that one up feels compelled to put the black and white one, even if it's like in a special feature or something like that, for sure. Yeah. Before I let you run, on a personal note, I'm wondering what sort of films you sort of lean into in your downtime. What kind of things do you watch?
It's funny because I'm often writing and developing other films. I tend to often be watching a lot of films that are like reference films, and then other than what's currently in the cinema. And I have a family, I have some young kids, so I don't get to the cinema nearly as much as I'd like. But I end up watching, I watch a lot of old stuff, partly because a lot of the films I develop tend to be period films, for better or worse. So I've been spending a decent amount of time on Criterion Channel and other places like that. And I'm developing this kind of Hitchcockian throwback to the 60s again right now. So I'm watching some of that kind of stuff. And so it's just fun to keep doing those deep dives. I keep doing them because some of that stuff you just can't get enough of.
100%. What's sort of a pure escapism movie for you?
Pure escapism movie. Well, yeah, like if I just want to completely not think, a default escapism would be like a 40s or 50s film noir. Not like a comedy or something. Not that I have anything, and I don't mind comedies, but I could just put on an old 40s or 50s film noir that I've seen many times, and that could just be like a relaxing thing to kind of watch. I don't know why. Maybe it goes back to my film school days where I used to watch like 4 of them a day, and was obsessed with them. But there's something about it that for me is just kind of puts me into a different place.
Very, very cool. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking a time to chat with me. This film's great, and you haven't made a bad movie yet, so I can't wait to see Queen of Bones and whatever this new one is that you referenced just there. Looking forward to it. But thanks so much, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. My pleasure.
I'm getting angry. Oh, that hurt.
Hey, Lewis, you all right, bud?
Delia's gone.
What happened, Lewis?
Send me an ambulance, please.
I don't know.
You hurt your sister?
Okay.
Go walk
Okay,
nice
bye.
and slow, Lewis. Come with us, Lewis.
What else do you remember?
If you talk about her, it can help us get back to the old Lewis.
Delia took her secrets to the grave.
I'm gonna move out.
But you live here with me.
I'm really sorry, Lewis.
There's a visitor here.
Lewis, you don't know the whole truth. How she died.
Tell me what you know.
Got a call about an assault. It was Lewis. He disappeared after your brother paid him a visit.
We need to have a chat about your visit with Lewis. You brought up Delia.
What'd you say?
The truth.
What's the truth?
Philly, Lyle, and Stacko were with Delia that night.
Lyle Dyson. Did you kill Delia?
You killed her. I don't ever want to hear that name again.
There's an unhinged dude running around.
The guy shouldn't run away from his own sins.
It's a damn phone!
I know you're tangled up in all this.
See this here line? It's straight to hell for you.
How did you die?
Drop the gun, Lewis!